This is Ed from Exotic Blanks, once again welcoming you to a video. As you know, Exotic Blanks offers a number of handmade pen blanks with clear resin covering different kinds of materials. Often the background is paper or snakeskins or any number of other kinds of absorbent materials. And so there have been some difficulties with some of the products, with people trying to use pen mills and other methods of squaring the ends. So I've put together this tutorial, video, whatever you want to call it, to try to give you some ideas on what I think is a good way to do these products so that you give them minimal stress and you have a minimum chance of ruining the blank. So let's get into it and see if we can discover some things that are maybe a little different technique. There's nothing earth-shaking here, but there are some changes in the way I approach these things. So let's begin. Ideally, we'd like to flatten these things before we start turning them, but they are fairly thick, so I'm using a 60 grit, and you see that it doesn't do an awful lot. It doesn't really take down the material very quickly. So I'm trying to figure out a faster way of doing the same thing. So instead I put it between centers with no bushings, just mount the blank between centers. My theory here is that I want to take off just enough on the two ends that it becomes easy to sand down the ends. So I'm going to take the two ends down. You could at the same time take down the middle if you wanted to. Another benefit of this is that with both ends being turned by 60-degree centers, you have very little friction that's actually turning this. So if you happen to take too big a chunk, it will stop rotating instead of ruining the blank. So it kind of is a defense mechanism against poor turning. If you turn it beautifully, all goes well. But if you try to push too hard, or if you try to take out what would have been a chunk, the material simply stops spinning, and so you really have a difficult time ruining it. So as you can see, I'm taking it down, and I am kind of intentionally stopping it from time to time just so you can see that that's what happens if you push too hard. That's one side done, and then I do the other side, and it's a fairly simple process. And what I'm doing is taking it down to the point where I have a blank that's probably short of 3/4 of an inch in diameter, so that when I go to sand it down, it's not going to be a big piece that has to have lots taken off. It will be relatively simple. Again, I will use the 60 grit sandpaper and take that off of there in relatively short order. As you can see, now we're set up to sand it. So I put a punch into a Jacob's chuck in the tailstock, and then put the blank onto that so that it stays square against my spinning sandpaper. The sandpaper is held on by hook and loop, Velcro if you will, and it's real easy to take it off and put it in a different position. So you can use one, I buy 5-inch diameter sheets or circles, and they'll last forever because you keep moving it around. So that's all there is to it. You keep sand one end down until you see the brass, and then sand the other end down until you see the brass, and you then have the blank prepared to put back on the lathe between centers with bushings. So now you have two flat surfaces, one on either end, and therefore when you do when you put the bushings on it, it's going to spin true, and everything's going to go the way that you hope for it to go. One new step we've added as we try to improve the methods so that you are successful more often, we now add thin CA to both ends after you've done the sanding down so that you have square ends. Take a little thin CA and just drizzle it, and be very, very sparing on this. Don't put much on it, so that if there is a gap between the brass and the resin, the CA will fill that gap. So put thin CA all the way around it on both ends and allow it sufficient time to cure. I would say a couple of hours, if you're using thin CA, should be good. Okay, the CA is cured, so now we're back to doing turning. We can take the two bushings and put them into the ends. When I tried to do that, I found out that one end had junk in it. That was dried CA. So we're now trying to clean out that end. Unfortunately, it's not easy to stay under the camera, so I apologize that it sometimes looks like I'm moving the thing out of camera frame. I'm just learning about the new setup. I spent some time to make a setup, but it isn't perfect. So we put the bushings in both ends and then mount it on the 60-degree center. This is an interesting change in the way that I've turned, and the reason I think that this is preferable, particularly for turners who aren't real confident, this will make sure that if you catch, you have a higher probability of the two ends slipping than you do of pulling out chunks of your material. So because you only have 60-degree angles that are turning this thing, and yet as you look at it, you can see that it is turning square. Everything is absolutely as square as it can be. The two bushings are turning the way that they're supposed to. They're not wobbling. So this is really a pretty good method for taking care of the possibility of chipping out, because the thing is turning, but it can be stopped relatively easily. It doesn't look like it when I turn it because I'm not putting much friction on there, but it is a good plan, I think. I think it will save you a lot of disasters. So this particular blank is called Moon Glow from the Opal series, which is new to us from Jackie Underhill, John Underhill's wife, John Underhill of Fantastic Feather fame. So we're really thrilled to have her making blanks for us now too, and apparently you're pretty thrilled with it too, because this is selling very quickly. So we appreciate your support of Jackie. And as you can see, this makes a really pretty pen. The material is reflective, and it reflects in a number of different colors, and so it really is a pretty pen. And when you see the actual finished arrow that I'm doing here, it's a very pretty pen that I think women would really enjoy. So as I'm finishing up here, you can see that I'm trying to get the two ends down to the diameter of the bushing, and I will play around with that a bit with a couple of different skews so that I can get it where I want it. Once we've reached the diameter that I'm happy with, then the next step after that, of course, will be to sand it. And I sand with 400. I can't find my 600 grit paper yet, so it's sanded to 400, and then after that I take it to the buffing and use Tripoli and white diamond and buff it out. So you won't see it get to the point where it looks pretty until the end, when I suddenly come back and it's just gorgeous because it's been buffed. But you'll also see the end product, the pen, which was really a nice looking pen. Dawn started it immediately, so you know it's a good one when she steals them, because she's got access to hundreds of pens. As always, thank you for watching. It's a pleasure to make these videos, and it's been a long time since I've made one. It's a lot of fun to do it in the new building. We don't have everything set up perfectly yet, so we will get better. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, and I hope this makes your success rate higher with different kinds of pen blanks that are purchased from Exotic Blanks. Thanks a lot.